Greetings everyone, I'm Kevin and I am going to talk to you about my 10 best books of 2021 so far. At first, I planned to do this video like a lot of people in the book community are doing it, a list of like my top 5 or top 10, top 15 or so on and so forth. And I've decided like I'm gonna do that too. So I went through my spreadsheet of every single book that I read and I started like compiling a list, and then I ended up with 25 books. And yeah, so I decided I can't do that. I get like 25 books to talk about as the best books is a little much. So I decided, okay, I'm gonna narrow it down to 10. But I didn't want to lose that many books of these. So I decided to take another route. So I'm going to talk about 10 books from 10 different categories. So I decided to do kind of like the best book of specific categories, and some of these categories are genre. But I just thought that would be a little bit like more fun to do, like the best book that was this way that I read is this book, and so on. So that's kind of what I'm doing. The best book of 10 different categories is the whole like idea behind this. So let's start. And the first category is best historical, and I chose it when my name was Kyoko by Linda Sue Park. I loved this. It's 192 pages long. It's extremely short, but I really love this. It was a very quick book to get through. It is set during the Japanese occupation of Korea, and we're following a Korean family in Korea when Korea wasn't Korea, it was Japan or part of Japan. So being Korea, being Korean, speaking Korean, writing in the Korean alphabet, the Hangul, was not allowed. You weren't allowed to be Korean, and symbols like for example, this flower here is the national flower that is like the Rose of Sharon tree, and it was like if you had one of those trees you would face punishments to like, yeah. So everything that kind of was connected to Korea was prohibited. A lot of Koreans didn't even know what the flag looked like and what the alphabet, like how to read the alphabet and stuff like that. Like if a text was written in Hangul, Koreans didn't know what it said because they only knew the Japanese script as well as the Hanja. And in this book, we're following this Korean family, as I said, in Japan or in like Japanese occupied Korea. And Kyoko is the Japanese name of Kim Sun-hee, who is one of our main characters that we're following. We're following from her perspective as well as her older brother Taeyul. They are kind of like the two characters that we follow in the book. It's very interesting to see also like the gender differences, how they grow up and what they learn, and being like separated in schools and stuff between genders. This book was really interesting to learn about like that whole period and what it was like being Korean when being Korean wasn't a good thing or it wasn't acceptable, and the whole thing with how important the World War II specifically was in the fate of Korea. And if you want to learn like why is Korea the way it is today, why is South Korea and North Korea so different, this is kind of like the whole build up during the 40s and up until this like the split of the Koreas. So all of that is in here. But this was very interesting to read, and I was very intrigued to continue reading. It was very easy to fly through. It's a very short book with short chapters, so it was very easy to fly through. My only issue with this book is that I wish it was longer. And I wish we had an extra perspective. Like, I understand that we got the two siblings, but I would have loved to have the perspective of one of the adults as well. But that's like the only critiques I guess I can say about this book. but I really enjoyed it. I definitely recommend this to everyone who is interested in learning how World War II affected different parts of the world, what it was like to be Korean during the 40s when Korea didn't exist technically. And if you're just curious about like Korean history or East Asian history and stuff like that, then you might really enjoy this. The next category is Best Literary Fiction, and for this I chose The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. This is a book that is pretty well known in the book community currently, and if you haven't heard about this book, it is following a girl called Nora, and she is, in the beginning of the book, battling with suicidal thoughts, and she actually tries to commit suicide, so trigger warning for that. And after her attempt, she ends up in the Midnight Library. And she meets a librarian who tells her that all of these infinite amount of books around us in this library are infinite possibilities and alternate lives that you could have lived. So Nora sets out to try different lives. So she tells the librarian, give me a book where I made this choice instead of the one that I actually made. And she is just put into the Nora in that alternate world and has to figure out who she is, what she's doing, why she's there, and stuff like that. And what I really enjoyed about this is that it kind of shows you that there is no perfect reality. There is always going to be one reality that has a little bit of sadness in it. Like, you can't escape the bad parts and the sad parts of life, but it also shows you that living is worth it. And I really loved this, that we got to just follow her and see her as she eventually realized that she didn't want to die. She wanted to live. She just didn't want to continue the vicious cycle that she was in, that she felt like stuck in. She wanted to do something else, but she didn't know what or how, so she get kind of like stuck in her depression because of it. So I thought this was very interesting and very like fun read to get through, and like reading all of her alternate realities, alternate possibilities in lives and stuff like that. And it kind of makes you think, what if I made another choice too? Like, you know, like what if I did this thing instead of that thing? And like, I just love that whole aspect to this book. I don't want to give away too much, but I definitely enjoy it. And just trigger warning for the whole thing with like the suicide attempt and suicidal thoughts that is in the beginning of the book. It does get better, but just, I know it's not the easiest thing to get through, especially if you've lived those experiences yourself like I have. It's not always easy to read about, but I definitely recommend this if you're into like philosophical and existential books and stories, because this is definitely those. The next book I'm going to talk about is no surprise to a lot of people, I think, and it is for the category of Best YA Romance. We have Dating Makes Perfect by Pintip Dunn. I adore this book. This book follows our main character, who is called Winnie. She comes from a very traditional Thai family, and she has two older twin sisters. The older sisters are twins. They're not her twins. I don't know. I just wanted to clarify that. But Winnie's older sisters, they're off to college, and their mom is like, when are you gonna find a husband? And they're like, but how can we find husbands if we never got to date? And the mom feels like, yeah, point taken. So Winnie, in her senior year of high school, is allowed to fake date only suitable Thai boys that her parents have chosen for her. So a family that Winnie's family is very close to and friends with, like they're friends with like the Thai American community in their where they live, and a boy of a family friend is Matt. And Matt and Winnie used to be best friends when they were younger, but out of nowhere, in Winnie's eyes, they stopped being friends and started hating each other. And so in Winnie's eyes, she and Matt do not like each other one bit. They are kind of like rivals or kind of like enemies on the school. Like they do pranks against each other in the past and have not been very pleasant to each other. So Winnie is kind of mad and confused about the whole thing that Matt is going to fake date her. And the whole thing that the fake dating works is that the mom chose specific dates from her favorite rom-coms, which was an aspect to the book that I quite enjoyed. And so Matt and Winnie go on dates that are taken straight out of rom-coms. And the whole thing in this, like the banter between Winnie and Matt, I love it. And their whole relationship, and we'll learn what happened, why Matt started ignoring Winnie, like when they were kids, when they were supposed to be best friends. Like, why did he stop talking to her and spending time with her? Why did he start ignoring and avoiding her? Like, we, as the story progresses, we, the readers, understand, like, oh, okay, so that is why. But Winnie takes a while to get it. And, like, I just really enjoyed the whole dynamic between Winnie and Matt and their story. I just flew through this book. It was such a fun ride. It is what I like to call best friends to enemies to fake dating to friends to lovers. Do I need to tell you more? The only thing, like, if I'm gonna have to say something that is negative about this, it's the cover. Like, I think the cover is gorgeous until, like, you zoom in. And it is extremely pixelated, which I think it's really pretty when you have it, like, on far away in the distance. But when you get close, the fact that it's kind of pixelated, I felt that was very sad because it's such a pretty cover that why did it, like, why? You know? I don't understand that. I know that I said that the worst thing about this, or the thing that I like the least about this, is the cover. That is not true. I hate this. Like, you see that there is a little thing here? Yeah, you want to know what that is? A piece of paper. So it's this. And I'm like, I don't know what to do with this. Should I cut it? Should I not? I don't know. Why? I just kind of keep it tucked in because I'm scared that if I do something, it will be worse. But I really enjoyed this. So this had, like, hands down the best YA romance that I have probably ever read, actually. Really enjoyed this. Recommend it to everyone who enjoys YA romance, especially, like, with those, you know, best friends to enemies to fake dating to friends to lovers. If you enjoy that, like, especially if you enjoy, like, childhood best friends to lovers with a dash of enemies to friends to lovers with a dash of enemies to fake dating romance, this is it. And speaking of romance, let's move from young adult romance to adult romance. And it is Meet Cute Club by Jack Harvin. This was such a cute book. It is also very, very short. It's like just over 200 pages long, but it's so worth it. It was such a fun and easy, like, read. The ending is very cheesy, so if you do not like cheesy romance in any way, you might not enjoy the ending of this book. But I thought it was very cute. It says so right here in the title, and it is true. Like, the book is very, very cute, and we're following, like, this guy who absolutely adores romance novels of every kind, no matter if it's, like, paranormal romance with vampires or historical romance or, you know, any kind of romance. He loves it. And his name is Jordan, and he also runs this little book club called the Meet Cute Club. And he goes to the bookstore and he is, like, buying a lot of books, 4 copies. No, he gets 6 copies of each book, like several books. I think he bought like 4 books in 6 copies of each at a bookstore. And this guy called Rex, that is so, no, this guy Rex. Because Rex is white and Jordan is black. So it's kind of like, because he has all the books, I'm like, this is Jordan and this is Rex. No, this is Rex, but he's carrying the books, and this is Jordan. And he's not carrying any books. It's kind of confusing. But Rex, this guy, he is the cashier in this bookstore, and he sees Jordan come up to him with like all of these books, and he's like, why are you buying books for grandmas? And Jordan gets into like a whole spiel that these books are like not like romance novels are for everyone, dude, kind of. And long story short, Rex ends up going to Jordan's next Meet Cute Club meeting. He joins the book club. The two of them did not in any way, shape, or form get off on the right foot when they first met at the bookstore. And like you can expect a lot of lovely banter, a lot of like interesting dynamics between them. This was just like a really fun and easy book to get through. I also really relate to Rex, because he comes from like a toxic family. He has a douchebag dad who is part of the book. And like you have him and like his issues with commitment, because he has a parent who does not commit to anything in his entire life, basically. And like it's very easy, breezy, fun to get through, but it is a little bit dark at times just because of Rex's past that comes into play several times in the book, so it can get a little bit difficult at those times, especially if you, like me, come from a toxic family or have like abusive relations in or outside of your family. It can be difficult, like parts of it, but most of it is just like a fun breeze. Like it's just a fun read to get through. It's very short, so it's not a lot deeper than that, but I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a very fun ride and a very cute romance. Then we're on to my favorite middle grade, and this was a no-brainer because this is absolutely the best middle grade that I read in 2021 so far. Do not count a single book that I read in July. Only the books in the first 6 months of the year are counted here. No book from July is counted. So this is the best middle grade that I read the first 6 months of 2021, and it is Wonderscape by Jennifer Bell. I love this. This is the story of 3 children. They are children. It sounds like, when I say children, it sounds like I'm talking about toddlers, but like there is no better word to describe them. They are children. They're kids. So these 3 kids live in our contemporary world, and on their way to school they hear a dog barking in a place where a dog should not be. And so they're like, we have to save this dog, and zoom zalabam, they're in an alternate world in the future. In the year 2473, 450 years in the future. That's where they end up. And when I say alternate world, I mean alternate world because it's kind of like they're in an in-reality video game. And this video game is called the Wonderscape. It is run by a company called Hyperion with an X. Yeah, that it doesn't make any sense, right? Why is there an X in Hyperion? But anyways, this in-game reality is a very fun thing in this book. There is like kind of virtual reality, except for the fact that it is reality. It is that kind of technology in the future that you actually live in a game, and you can go through portals to kind of move around the game, and there are different worlds for different heroes. And that whole aspect to this was really, really fun, that you can see historical figures from different parts of history and the future. Like there are historical heroes in this that aren't historical for us because they haven't even been born yet. So all of that is very interesting to see. But the whole game aspect in this reads a lot like a mystery, because the 3 main characters have to work together to win in each different realm. because if you do, you get perks and you get to meet the hero. And there is another mystery going on in this that they have to solve, but I don't want to say what that mystery is, but it's kind of like the main plot in this is to find a missing person. And the only way to do that is to kind of go through all of these different things, kind of jump through a lot of hoops, piece everything together. So this is a very like mystery set in the future with kind of like alternate or virtual reality game. So if you enjoy mysteries, you enjoy science fiction, like the whole future aspect, future technology, and you also like when there's kind of like game aspects to it as well. I personally have not read Warcross or Ready Player One, but I have heard that if you like those, you may like this, and vice versa, because of like the whole game aspect. So this was just a very fun middle grade read. I love the whole world building in this, and the mysteries in this was very interesting, and it kept me guessing, which is what a good mystery should do. The next book is a book that I do not own. It's the only book on this list that I do not own, and it is for the category Best Novel in Verse, and I chose Vitsvit by Athena Farrokhzad, and in English it looks like this. This is a book that wasn't even 100 pages long, but it's a book that really stays with you. It is specifically about a Middle Eastern family in Sweden and what it's like being Middle Eastern in a country where the norm is being white. And the norm in Sweden is also being Swedish. Like a big difference between, for example, like Sweden and the US is in the US, the norm is kind of like to be white and immigrant. In Sweden, it's being white and not being an immigrant. So being both an immigrant and Middle Eastern in a white country, it's kind of like that perspective that we get, and what the main character and her family and her like brother also, their perspectives and their experiences in Sweden. And I also love how it's kind of formatted, because as it is called white blight or vitsvit in Swedish, the text, like the pages are white, but the text is also white, and the text has like is white on black blocks. So there are black blocks with white text on them, and that it's very beautifully done. Like the whole format of it is just very cool. It's a very like cool experience just reading it or just flipping through that book. It's really nice. I just really love the book and how you kind of, through being a novel in verse, how you got to, like, because the book is a novel in verse and because it's not even 100 pages long, there's still a lot of points in the book and a lot of quotes that kind of stick out and kind of punch you, that you kind of have to take a step back and reread a few times. And while reading this book, I don't know how many pictures I took of pages in the book, because there were so many times in the book that I felt like this was like very well done. Like this was very well written, and it was written in a way that makes you think. And I just think it's a very like thought-provoking book, and it is a very quick read, but I recommend it to everyone, like no matter background or ethnicity or nationality or anything. Totally recommend it. It's fun read, and it's very, as I said, like very interesting and thought-provoking and very quick and beautiful to look at. The next book I'm going to talk about is the best new release. And apparently I haven't read that many new releases yet. The first half of the month, the first half of the year, January to June. And the book that I consider the best new release that I read is The X Talk. It was between this and a few others, but when I kind of like went through those, I felt like the book that stands out the most to me is The X Talk. And this is the story of Shay and Dominic at their radio station. So Dominic is relatively new to this radio station, and his big thing is doing news broadcasting, revealing the truth, and doing like that kind of stuff is what he's really into and why he wanted to get into radio and becoming a reporter in the first place. Shay is a producer who is working only behind the scenes, producing, giving directions and stuff like that. But then the radio station is in a bit of a problem because they are losing money and they have to make cuts and they have to save the radio station. And in attempts to save the radio station, there are like opportunities for people who work there to give pitches. And Shay gives the pitch to do a radio show where exes give relationship advice. And the radio station people in charge, the bosses or whatever they're called, love the idea, and so starts the X Talk. But they don't have the resources or the money to hire new people because, you know, like they're making cuts. People are losing their jobs, so they can't give, you know, jobs to people on the street who are exes. So they decided because Shay and Dominic do not like each other one bit, they can pretend to be exes. So this is what I like to call fake dated. Not fake dating, fake dated. They pretend that they have dated in the past and that they are now exes. And the show is a success. Everyone loves them. People are reaching out. They're gaining a lot of publicity. And people are just going absolutely nuts over this radio show. And while Dominic and Shay pretend to be exes and have gone through like a lot of dates and everything in like relationships with the other person, they fall in love behind the scenes. And it's really beautiful. It's very beautiful in my opinion. And like the whole setting of this being like a radio show is something that I really enjoyed a lot. I felt this was a lot of fun just to read. My only issue with this was the ending, that I felt like I get it. I don't like it, but I get it. And it was cute, so I will kind of give it credit for that. But that's the only point of this book that I feel like I wish it was different. But it is what it is. Still really enjoy it. Still consider this the best new release that I have read so far in 2020. 2021. The Olympics really messes with me because they say Tokyo 2020. And so I think, oh, we're still in 2020, but we're not. We're in 2021. So this is the best new release of 2021 that I have read so far. Then we're on to the best paranormal that I've read this year. And I chose The Happy Vicious Spirits by Kat Cho, even though I read the first book this year too. So I could technically choose Gumiho Wicked Fox because it is the first book in this duology. But I just love this book so much more than Gumiho. So I felt like if I have to choose a best paranormal book, I'm going to pick this. And this book is, even though it says companion, it is not a companion, it is a sequel. You should not read this book if you have not read Gumiho Wicked Fox. And this is the same story. It follows the events of the last book, the first book, Gumiho Wicked Fox, and the same characters, but we're following another perspective. We followed the same perspective in the first, like the main character Mi-young in the first book, we're following her perspective in this as well, but the focus is on Junwoo and Seun, these two. And Junwoo is probably my favorite character this whole year so far. Like, I haven't read a character done better than him. Like, he was such a fun character to read, and you really understood like how the book progressed. You understood like why he was the way he was, and why his story went the way it did, why he made certain choices and stuff like that. Like, I felt like I understand this character and why he's making the choices that he's making and why he is the way he is. And so a little quick about Gumiho Wicked Fox. It's following Mi-young, who is a Gumiho, which is a 9-tailed fox in Korean mythology. Both books are based on Korean mythology and are set in Seoul, South Korea. And if you think that whole aspect sounds really fun, you should go and pick up Gumiya Wicked Fox. You will not regret it. And then when you finish that one, you can read this. If you're interested in Korean mythology, you like kind of K-dramas with paranormal or just paranormal or K-dramas. I got into these because they were kind of pitched as, if you enjoy K-dramas, you will enjoy these. So I picked them up and I get it. Really love this book. Read Give Me a Wicked Fox and then you can read this and just loved it. Hi, sorry if the lighting and the screen, whatever, has changed. My phone, which I'm filming on, did not cooperate. So it's like an hour later. But I have 2 more books to talk about, so let's just continue. The next book I'm going to talk about is the best fantasy that I read so far in 2021. I chose Frostblood by Ellie Blake for this. I read this book back in February for Polar Fawn. That was really, really fun. I managed to read 12 books in 7 days. Still very impressed by my own ability to read under pressure. But I really enjoyed this, and this is the story of Ruby, who is a fireblood in a world of frostbloods. And what that means is that Ruby has quite a temper, and she is warm-blooded, and she has like the power over like heat, fire, flames, and stuff like that. So she has warm powers. While frostbloods, they control cold elements. So they're kind of more like Elsa from Frozen, while firebloods are more like firebenders from Avatar: The Last Airbender. And frostbloods are also more reserved, more calm, cold-blooded, and those kind of things. And Ruby is found out very early in the book, so it's not a spoiler, that her being a fireblood is revealed and she is on the run. And she kind of gets into this rebellion against the monarchy of this kingdom, and people want to overthrow the king and just, that whole thing. And as a fireblood, she is needed to, in order to fight the king and to kind of, what is it called? Put him out of power. They need a fireblood. Someone who has quite a temperament, who can, make fires and heat and stuff. Because frostblood fighting another frostblood has been done. It's not as effective than a fireblood fighting a frostblood. Heat versus cold, So they want Ruby to help them in their rebellion of overthrowing the king. And this also has kind of an enemies to lovers romance, and they are actual enemies because of reason. I don't want to spoil anything. I don't want to go into it. But they're not enemies in the sense that I tried to kill you and destroy you and now I love you. It's not really like that. They hate each other for reasons. They have tried to kill and harm each other, but not in that way that it's, that kind of enemy that you would I hate you so much that I can watch you be tortured and I wouldn't care. Not that kind of enemies, but enemies in the sense that I am a frostblood and you're a fireblood, so I should hate you, and vice versa. I am a fireblood and you're a frostblood, your kind are literally trying to kill me. So it's kind of that kind of enemy, and not, as I said, the other kind of enemy that is abusive. Yeah. But I don't want to get into too much in detail of how it is. It works, and it's quite a slow burn, the romance, in that way that you really get to see why they think the way they do. And Arcus in this book, I love him, and you really understand why he hates Ruby, and them getting together, understanding the other, and becoming friends despite everything. That's it's beautifully written in my opinion. And this I just really love the world in this. And immediately after reading this, I was like, I need the second book ASAP. So I bought the second book and the third book, and I have not gotten to them yet. They are one of my highest priorities to finish those two books before the end of the year, because I want to know what is happening and I want to finish the series while I still understand, while I still remember, that's the word, what happened in this book. Because if I let it like slip away from me, I will end up reading the second book and be like, I don't remember what happened in this. And then I will have to reread it. I don't really care. Like, I love this. I will gladly reread it. But I would much rather just jump into the second book and then the third, you know? So yeah, so this is the best fantasy. What is up with my brain today? This is the best fantasy of 2021 so far. Really, really love this. Like, if you like elemental magic, a nice enemies to lovers, where it's more like, I hate you because of what you are, to lovers thing, rebellion, overthrowing a king, down with the monarchy, stuff like that. I say that and I'm very happy about the Swedish monarchy. But monarchies in fantasy are a whole other thing. I am pretty sure that if I lived in like medieval Sweden, I would probably also want to overthrow the king. But anyways, really enjoyed this. Recommend it to everyone who likes kind of elemental magic, fantasy, rebellion, that kind of hate to love thing, just dynamic characters, and a really awesome main character who is a woman. I love that. So really recommend this. Best fantasy of 2021 so far. And then we're on to the last book of the list. Just like 3 hours after I started this video. But the category is best graphic novel. This was a little bit tricky because like graphic novels, I had a lot of books that I felt like are amazing graphic novels. Like I really enjoyed Illegal, really loved that book. It's about like an African boy and his brother and how they are trying to leave for a better life in Europe, and it's a refugee story. So I really enjoy Illegal. I thought the art style in it was really good as well. Another graphic novel that I loved was They Call This Enemy, which is a memoir by George Takei in what it was like being Japanese during the concentration camps, where I'm using concentration camps because that's the word that he uses in the book. And that is kind of like in the 40s when Pearl Harbor was sunk by the Japanese. Americans rounded up Japanese Americans and put them to camp. And yeah, I thought that was really cool. Like seeing that kind of memoir style in a graphic novel was really, really awesome to see. It was a very important book, I would say. I learned a lot, and it was very interesting to see all of that happened from a child perspective, because he was just a child when that happened, and then how that whole thing affected him in his adulthood, and then how his whole experience with Star Trek affected him as well, and like all of his life, how everything kind of impacted him. As a Trekkie fan, I also thought like the Star Trek elements of it was really cool. But that book I also really enjoyed. And then the last book, the last graphic novel that I read up until the end of June, because I'm not counting July books, is Check Please. And I chose the first book in the series, #hockey. Really, really love this. This was so awesome. Like the art style of this, I think, is really cute. Like it's like this. Oh, oops. It's kind of like the art style is this way. I just find it so beautiful. The way that Ngozi Ukazu has drawn all of it is really, really cute. I just really enjoy just looking at the images in this one. It was really nice. And we're following Biddy, and he is just starting off in college. He is going to kind of, a sports college kind of thing. I don't really know specifically. I don't live in the US. I don't know how sports teams work in that way, like if he is actually going to a hockey specific program on university, or if he goes to university and he plays for the hockey team too. I don't know like that, if they are connected, if he's studying hockey or if he just plays hockey for the university but goes another program. I don't know. But he is studying at the university, starts to play for their hockey team, and he is really interested in baking. And it's gay. Like, he is gay. He has to struggle with being gay in this hockey team as well. And the whole, like, all the relationships in this is absolutely fantastic. His relationship to his family is beautiful. His relationship to his teammates, I love it. And I'm a huge hockey fan. Like, hockey is my second favorite sport after handball. And on the third, number 3 is actually not soccer, it's biathlon. But then we have like soccer. So, but this is my second favorite sport. Hockey is my second favorite sport of all time. So having like a sports romance that is male, like a queer sports romance involving hockey is yes. And this is it. And this was so fun to read, and I love the ending of it. This was perfection. It did not need a sequel. This is everything. Like, this is just was such a fun book to read. Like, I love this. And if you enjoy like sports and like sports stories with a dash of romance, like the romance part in this isn't, I wouldn't categorize this as a sports romance as its genre, because the romance part in this isn't like the main focus. This is more focused on Biddy and his kind of journey on this hockey team. So this is more about Biddy, hockey, and baking. And then the whole like relationships in this, absolutely fantastic. So if any of that sounds good to you, I definitely recommend this. And also like look at the art. But yeah, that was it for all the like the 10 categories of best books. I don't want to say the top 10 books of 2021 because these are probably not the top 10 because of how I categorized it, that I decided like I'm not gonna make a list of top 10. All of these would be in like all of these books were in my top 20, my top 25 book list, and that's kind of like why I decided on doing like different categories instead, so that I could get to talk about as many as diverse a span as possible. Because if I would just have like my top 10 books, a lot of them would be the same genre. Like you would have 4 books that would be romance and you know like that. So I felt like in order for this to be a little bit more diverse in the books chosen, I decided, hey, I'm gonna do categories instead. So you have had the best book of each category instead. So 10 books that are among the 25 best of 2021. If you actually want my 25 best books of 2021, please let me know down below and I can make that happen. I was a little bit scared that it would be a little bit of a long video of me just gushing about the 25 best books that I have read that I will like take with me to the next half of 2021 with like, yeah. But that was it, and please let me know if you want that kind of video. Is there any of these books that you've read? And if so, what do you think about them? I would love to know. And until next time, good reading. Bye.